In the last episodes, we were talking about how to traverse the Feywild, how to get into Feywild, how to get out of Feywild, how to find a magic portal that will get you inside, what conditions you have to meet to get inside, and how you need to react to the environment to get out of the Feywild, if you want. In this episode, we will be talking about the famous Fey Court. We will be focusing on the two major courts in the beginning, but I would also like to show you how I use the Fey Courts in my games and how you can structure the Feywild Courts in your games in accordance to what you find interesting and important in your narrative. I am Timur Sol, and this is basically Feywild. Whenever you search for the Feywild, you will bump into something called the Seelie Court and the Unseelie Court, or the Seelie Fey and the Unseelie Fey. The Seelie Fey are supposed to be those that are good, and the Unseelie Fey are supposed to be those that are in some way evil or bad. And now this is a very basic distinction, a very binary understanding of the Fey, which is somewhat contradictory to what we came to understand about the Fey already. Fey and Feyish creatures don't have a rigid morality like we do. They don't understand things in the same way that we do. So it would be awkward if they would understand evil and good in the same way as we perceive it. Now, to search for the roots of this division between Seelie and Unseelie, we could go back to the, for example, previous editions of Dungeons & Dragons. You can go to the 3rd edition, where Feywild wasn't actually a part of the echoes of the material plane. It was one of the planes of existence, and although it had some common qualities to nowadays Feywild, it was something very, very different. It resided next to other chaotic planes like Pandemonium, and as such, it consisted of creatures that were half celestial and half demon. So the half celestials were the so-called Seelie, and the half demons were the so-called Unseelie or evil Fey. That was the division that the 3rd edition tried to force upon us, although it is very, very naive and, in my opinion, banal to take that as enough of an explanation. If you go into the folklore and myths and so on, you will find that in Scottish folklore and Scottish myths, the Seelie and Unseelie are also present, and that is where we got the word Seelie and Unseelie. So Seelie would be happy, would be blessed, would be those that are lucky. So those are the Seelie Feys. The Unseelie would be, well, directly the opposite. So the unlucky, the unholy, the cursed, the unhappy Fey, that would be the Unseelie. If you're wondering why we're not using these words nowadays except for the Fey, well, we are using them. If you take the Seelie word and just pronounce it a little bit different, you will get silly, the Seelie Fey. On a very basic level, you can understand the Seelie Fey as those that have a lucky life, those that are leading a life that is blessed, and their main goal in their lives is to be joyful, is to be happy, is to be full of fun. That is their purpose in life. They try and strive on that which is which brings them joy. They feast on their desires, in a way. So if they want something to happen and it brings them joy and it brings them fun, that will be their goal. They're not exactly preoccupied with consequences, with moral questions and so on, although they are known to be benevolent. They are known to be those Fey and those creatures that look upon humanity and humanoids with an interest, but also some kind of liking, some kind of kindness in it. So even if they do play tricks on us, they do it in a manner that won't hurt us. That is the idea that a Fey Seelie creature might have. So a trick is okay, playing a prank is okay, but just make sure that the human, that the mortal is not harmed in the process. The Unseelie Fey, in a traditional manner, would be those Fey that they are not preoccupied with moral questions and quandaries like that. They also have their desires, and they also are somewhat embodiments of different desires that also us humans may have. But they won't stop at nothing to fulfill those desires, even if it brings pains, torment, torture to humanoids. So they won't refrain from torturing a humanoid if that is what they actually want in this specific moment. Both the Seelie and Unseelie Fey, as mentioned, they are driven by desires, but the way in which they act upon these desires is somewhat different. Typical representatives of the Seelie Courts would be dryads, would be pixies, would be satyrs, centaurs, nymphs, and other creatures that we know from our folklore and our myths, and that are traditionally considered to be good creatures. The Unseelie would be trolls, would be hags, redcaps, meanlocks, and so on. So creatures that we also know from our folklore and mythology, but they are almost every time the evil character in the myth and the story that is told. In this simplistic understanding of the Fey and the division that is between them, you have the Seelie and Unseelie. Very often it is that the Seelie are the same as the Summer Court, and the Unseelie is the same as the Winter Court. Very often you can find that these two terms are interchangeable, so you would say the Seelie Court of the summer or the Unseelie of the winter. Now, again, this is very, very simplistic and very naive to think that such complicated creatures like the Fey would have only two courts, which actually represent good and evil in our understanding, while the Fey don't even have an understanding about good and evil at all. The 4th edition books that we had, so Heroes of the Feywild, for example, those books gave us some more courts to ponder upon and think upon. And I will use some quotes from the books from the Manual of Planes and the Heroes of the Feywild from 4th edition to give you an understanding of what I mean. First, we have the Court of Stars. Several times a year, at no set schedule, the Archfey and their allies gather for a parliament in Bahanalia, merging their royal courts into one great congress. They spend the time negotiating, feasting, scheming, marrying, and betraying each other. The collected court has no true leader, but it is hosted by the Archfey known as the Summer Queen. The Eladrin call this assembly the Court of Stars. Over the centuries, the signatories of the Court of Stars have aligned themselves into factions. These vie for influence in the court, which translates into arcane power and territory out in the Feywild. Second is the Summer Court, or the Summer Fey, led by Tiandra, the Summer Queen, who is one of the mightiest of the Archfey. With a smile she can rip in a crop, and with a frown summon wildfires. Noble Eladrin infused with the spirit of summer count themselves as her barons. Other spirits of growth and good favor follow her banner. Her court and its followers are known as the Summer Fey. Tiandra appears as an Eladrin of great beauty with honey-colored skin and hair that shimmers through all the colors of autumn leaves. The Summer Queen's court is in the palace of Selenis is a reflection of her unearthly beauty, and the court can appear frivolous. The third court is the Green Fey, led by Oren, the Green Lord. Now I think honestly that Oren is basically Oberon, and it's hard to explain why over here he's Oren. Also, it's hard to explain why Titania is Tiandra in 4e, but that's how it is. So, Oren the Green Lord is the greatest of the Archfey of nature. He could be mistaken for an elf, albeit one a head taller and far more muscular than any other elf in existence. Oren's wild eyes are jet black and set in a rugged face of the color of oak. His thatched hair is a mess of bramble and long braids. As a hunter and a woodland warrior, he is unrivaled. It is said even the god Corellon regards him with a cautious respect. Oren is attuned to every branch and bought every stream and every forest of the Feywild. In addition to elves who dwell in the Feywild, he has the loyalty of many treants, dryads, and satyrs. And since we got a Summer Fey, we also have the Winter Fey. The Fey Lords who chose the path of winter or deadly cold, biting ice and blinding snow are known as the Winter Fey. Although they have no true leader, the most powerful and ruthless of the lot is the Prince of Frost. When he bothers to convene his allies of the long night, his faction is known as the Winter Court. Narrow of build, pale and light-haired, the Prince of Frost has a smile that does not warm. He is not unnecessarily cruel, but he has not an ounce of mercy in his heart. The fifth court is the Sea Lord's Court, or the Court of Coral. The Fey of the rivers and oceans bow to the will of the Eladrin Archfey known as the Sea Lords. Elias and Shiobian Alastai are brother and sister. Eladrin, who only a few centuries ago achieved the level of power, elevating them to the Archfey. Because of their recent elevation, they are less emotionally detached than many of the Archfey. They are, if not approachable, at least not as terrifying as many of the other great nobles of the Court of Stars. And lastly, we have the Gloaming Fey, which are sparked by the arcane influence within the Feywild. Some Archfey manifest more abstract qualities than seasons or living nature. Many are associated with dreams, darkness, stars, twilight, dusk, and other such nocturnal phenomena, and so they are collectively known as the Gloaming Fey. Although equal in power to the other courts, these Archfey keep their own council. They are composed of a loose league rather than a proper faction, but when the Court of Stars is in session, they band together during court intrigues. The most well-known of the Gloaming Fey is the Maiden of the Moon. Now, what is interesting, the Maiden of the Moon is not actually the Queen of Air and Darkness that we know from other lore. She's simply a creature that is warring with lycanthropes and other savage killers of the night, as she is benevolent towards mortals. So she's not exactly the same creature. In the 5th edition, we only have 2 courts. One is led by Queen Titania, and the other is led by the Queen of Air and Darkness. And additionally, the Dungeons Master's Guide explicitly tells us that Queen Titania and her summer court lead the Seelie Fey, and that the Gloaming Court, led by the Queen of Air and Darkness, is also leading the Unseelie Fey. So again, we're going back to this basic division Unseelie-Seelie, which is additionally interchangeable with winter and summer. Okay, so maybe let's look at the summer and winter courts and see what they have to offer. Maybe that is enough for us in our games. And I'm not saying that it shouldn't be. In my games, I have more courts, but in your game, it could be simply enough. Maybe this basic division is something that works for your campaign. Don't take my words for granted. Since we don't have any proper 5e lore about different courts in the Feywild, I am looking at the Winter and Summer Eladrin, a subrace of elves that can give us a glimpse of what the designers of the 5th edition D&D had in mind when they were thinking about the Feywild. And they've given us winter personality traits and winter flaws, and also summer personality traits and summer flaws. So this is, I believe, quite a good example of what you can think about those seasons also, and how you can think about the courts themselves. For both personality traits and flaws, we have 4 examples. Let's start with the personality traits of the winter. The worst case is the most likely to occur. You preserve what you have. Better to be hungry today and have food for tomorrow. Life is full of dangers, but you are ready for them. A penny spent is a penny lost forever. And the flaws? Everything dies eventually. Why bother building anything that it's supposedly meant to last? Nothing matters to you, and you allow others to guide your actions. Your needs come first. In winter, all must watch out for themselves. And the last one, you speak only to point out the flaws of others' plans. So, really melancholic and on one way, and on the other side, it's also showing the planning side of the Winter Court. And for the summer personality trait, we have these. You believe that direct confrontation is the best way to solve problems. Overwhelming force can accomplish almost anything. The tougher the problem, the more force you apply. You stand tall and strong so that others can lean on you. And the last one, you maintain an intimidating front. It's better to prevent fights with a show of force than to harm others. And when it comes to flaws, it's you are stubborn, let others change. The best option is the one that is swift, unexpected, and overwhelming. Punch first, talk later, and your fury can carry you through anything. So again, you have this passion and desire of summer. I feel that this is a quite good representation of both courts. Well, at least the only representation that we get up until the point at which I'm recording this video. As you see, the summer and the winter court, as much as we know it up until now, it's something that is already rather interesting. You can give your own flair and your own theme to both summer and winter, or Seelie and Unseelie, and you might work with that alone. It might work for your campaign. I would, however, suggest using the 4 seasonal courts. So instead of Seelie Unseelie, using the spring, summer, autumn, winter courts, and using the Seelie Unseelie as a broader brackets for types of Fey. So let's start with the spring court. The spring court is the first court in the year. It is the waking of the life anew. It is empty riverbeds filling with water. It is grass getting greener day by day. It is the earth waking up from a deep winter slumber. The spring embodies desires. It embodies ambitions. It embodies passion for things that are coming. It embodies everything that is unknown, but with an excitement and expectation. That is the spring. The spring is usually in most courts and in most lore is led by King Oberon. King Oberon is a character that is present in various types of literature. You can find him all around. He is usually depicted as a young, beautiful elven man with red hair, freckles, and antlers. He is also one of the most powerful Fey, obviously. And one tip that I would like to give you in this moment, when you are describing the Fey and when you are describing specific courts, for example, use your other senses that you have. Talk about smells, talk about emotions, talk about how it feels when you touch it, talk about the taste that you have in your mouth. So spring, for example, could taste like the freshest fruit that you can imagine. It could have the smell of fresh cut grass. It could have well, you can imagine things that are connected to newness. It could have the feel of a baby skin, for example. Things that are new, things that are full of ambition and full of possibilities for the future. The summer court, well, in this case, the summer court is something of a copy of the summer court that I've been talking about a little bit earlier. The summer court is led by Titania. Is the season of growth. It is the season of when the whole Feywild becomes somewhat a feverish dream or a fervent dream. Plants are sprouting everywhere, and they are taller and bigger, and as I mentioned in one of the earlier episodes, in the Feywild everything is more, so the plants are more, they are bigger, stronger, greener, more yellow, more pink, more red, more everything. The spring embodies uncontrollable lust. And mind you, similarly as ambitions, lust is not always something that is good. Lust can be the reason for murder. Lust can be the reason for crimes of passion. Also, ambition can be such a thing. So keep in mind that spring and summer, although in our heads it's something nice, doesn't have to be so Seelie as you could think. The summer Fey tend to be somewhat arrogant. They tend to be somewhat directed towards themselves or focused on themselves. But as mentioned, they don't have this drive to harm other beings, especially humanoids. They would play pranks and so on, but not harmful pranks. And again, using some other senses, it's the smell of the rain. It's the smell of a summer rain, of the ground after the summer rain. It's the smell of a lightning strike. When lightning strike is somewhere near, it's the smell of ozone somewhere in the air. That is the summer Fey, how it could feel or how it could smell in your games. There is a distinction between the summer and the spring. Obviously, there has to be some distinctions between the two, and it is rather hard to catch this distinction, since both spring and summer are connected with rising of plants, with earth bearing fruits, and so on, with grass, with greens, and blah blah blah. Well, it is hard, but if you would like, you can think of it like this. Imagine a situation where two Fey, one representing spring and one representing summer, come across a wounded animal. Spring, as it is focused on potential and growth, will do everything to tend to the animal and bring it back to health, as its potential is yet not fulfilled. The summer Fey is about sustaining the highest possible state of existence. As such, the summer Fey may try to end the animal's suffering. By this, it would choose to rather sustain another form of life by feeding the dead animal to a different creature or by making it decompose for plants. Autumn is a very interesting court. It is the season is very short, but the court itself might not be so short in their ambitions. It's the season that is connected with the preparations, but also with harvest, with concealment somewhat, and also with fear in a way. So you can have the autumn Fey be led by no king at all, and that is a very, very popular thing to do, to have no king of the autumn Fey. In my world, I do have one, and for example, I use the Pumpkin King as the king of the Autumn Fey. But you can use another more Oberon-like representative to make the balance more even. A great example of that would be Partholon, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, from Dresden Files, the book series. Very how do you call him? He's neither cold nor warm. He's very balanced, very timid. He's a handsome young man, but much more noble than Oberon. Noble in understanding that he's very dignified, very aristocratic, not like Oberon, who is very wild and very passionate about everything. Partholon would be very down to the ground. That is also an option that you can use. As mentioned, many people don't have a king or a queen on the autumn court throne, and it is also very, very, very viable option that you can have. It's the autumn can represent emotions like maturity, like balance, but as mentioned, also fear. So your autumn court can have easily influences from everything that you think about when you think Halloween, and not the pop cultural way, but the way it was probably meant to be. So the fear, the boogeymans, and so on. These are parts of these could be parts of the Fey Autumn Court. And I mentioned that the Fey Autumn Court is the most interesting one, or a very interesting court. That is because autumn is a very short season, and because of that, the ambitions that run through the autumn court representatives is very high. They are not as arrogant as the summer, and they are not as balanced as the winter. I'm going to talk about the winter in a minute. So it is very, very common, and it's a trope that the autumn court is the one that leads to many conflicts and stirs conflicts between the courts, while other courts play a game of balance and a Cold War-like game of balance. The autumn court is the one that is very cutthroat, mischievous one. And again, talking about emotions and feelings and senses, when we talk about autumn court, you can have it smell like mushrooms, but you can also have it smell like a fungus that creeps up on a damp wall. You can have it smell like rotten leaves, the typical wet, rotten heap of leaves. You can have it smell like old wine or blood that has been spilled somewhere. That is something that would work good for the autumn court. And lastly, the winter court. It's in the basic binary division. This would be connected with death, and this would be the Unseelie court. In my understanding, and in the seasonal understanding of the courts, it's not only death, it's also perfect calmness, perfect balance, perfect peace. You can imagine a landscape covered in snow, and you can almost feel the sensation of calmness and balance, and slowly falling to sleep. It embraces travelers, it embraces travelers and wanderers, but it embraces them with eternal sleep. That is winter. Winter is usually led by the Queen of Air and Darkness. That would be Mab, usually Mab. Sometimes she is also called differently. And emotions would be patience, endurance, but also the sense of impeding death, or the sense of things that have to end. And not like in autumn where you have fear. This is the sense of certainty of death and an end that is closing by. Winter could smell like cold, fresh air during a blizzard, but it can also have a taste like when you crush a mint on your tongue, and the mint flows all around you. It could be the sensation of petting a dog that has been on the outside and has cold fur, or a cold cat, for example, if the cat stood in the window. That is what the winter Fey would be connected with. And again, there's a distinction between the Fey of the autumn and the Fey of winter. The autumn Fey are cutthroat, and the winter Fey would be more political and more behind the curtains, so very manipulative and not straightforward. Winter, as it is connected with balance and peace and calmness, doesn't do cutthroat actions. That is something that autumn will do. And lastly, obviously, you can have creatures that are not committed to any court. It is also very common that the fairy creatures or the fey creatures that are connected to natures, like nymphs and dryads that I earlier put into the basket of the Seelie Fey, they might be courtless. They might be the so-called Wyldfey. So Fey that do not align with any specific court, because they are connected with nature alone and not with a season or with a reflection of something. They reflect nature itself, so they don't need any additional boosts or any additional courts for that. Although this is again something that you can use as a plot hook, free Archfey might be a very, very interesting object if for any court if the players manage to convince that Archfey to join the court that is hiring them. And you can have, again, a conflict, a political conflict between different courts that involve your players to pull an Archfey that is free to one side or another. And each side has its good and bad sides, so it's also a moral question, and that is the best that you can get in D&D, right? To give you a small example of how easy it can be to create your own Fey Court, I prepared a little sheet that you can use in your games, or just to give you an idea of how you can do it by yourself. So what I got here is a list of emotions, a list of feelings that you can have. We got very common things like disdain, bitter, upset, weak, fear, guilt, hostile, lively. Also happy things like happy, open, calm, peaceful, lucky, cranky, shaken, tight, powerless, and so on. So a list of emotions that are good and bad. What we can do really easily is just add these words to our list of emotions, and you have a ready court for your own. The Court of Caring, the Court of Empathy, the Court of Fear. And it's really easy actually to think about what could be in the Court of Fear. You can have mean locks, you can have all the emotions or all the things that you would connect with fear, all the creatures that you could connect with fear can be parts of these courts. You can have specific mechanics for this court. You can have your players roll for wisdom saves or get frightened. That's very, very simple. You can create Archfays with simply adding Lady or Lord of the something. So you can have the Lord of the Isolated, which would be a Fey embodiment of, or demigod almost, of those that are imprisoned, for example. You can have the Lady of the Cynical or the Cynical Lady. You can have the Gloomy Lady or the Lady of the Gloom or Lady of the Grief, which again would be rather Unseelie Fey. You can have Lady of the Calm, and again this would be a very much different creature, and could be a very much different creature in your game. And you can have different variations of this, and then the Frilled Court would be probably something I would love to see. The Enchanted Court sounds like something straight from a D&D book. The Empty Court, this is something that could be, this is basically, for me, when I look at this is already plot hook. So you have a court that is has an empty throne, and you need to find someone that will be the king of this empty court. The Moody Court would be something straight from the Cure album, probably. The Radiant Court, the Moved Court, the Worm Court, the Cranky Court. Well, obviously not all of these will fit into your game, but most of them should. So a Terrified Court could be all hare folk or rabbit folk that are constantly terrified of the big bad wolf that is somewhere in the vicinity. The Humiliated Court, I'm not sure what that could be. The Daring Court, the Confident Court, the Powerful Court. All these strike you probably immediately as something that would probably work, more or less, since these are emotions that we understand on a very basic level, so it's simple to use them in your games. To make the world work for me, I need to plan things out. Usually I use mind maps to do that, and you can see one of these mind maps on the screen behind me. Well, I started with the material plane. I started thinking what I should have surrounding this this material plane regarding my campaign and my plot idea in my campaign. So you got the material plane and you got the echo plane of Shadowfell, which I'm not discussing in this series. Maybe it's a topic for another series. If so, you can always leave me a comment. If Shadowfell is something that is interesting to you, I would be intrigued by using also that as a excuse for making more videos. As you might have seen over here, I'm using different entities from different lore over here. But what is interesting for us right now is the Feywild. What I'm having is each of the courts, so spring, summer, autumn, and winter, have their own representatives, and these representatives over here are representatives from different folklore, myths, and lore from previous editions. So I'm not building from scratch, and I'm not building in the void. I'm using lore that already exists to build something from existing ideas, and I'm just paraphrasing them in my own campaign. I got my notes in my hand because I obviously maybe don't know each and every of those entities, those nobles by hand, but for most I don't think I will need it. We got the King Oberon as the king of the Spring Court, a young beautiful elven humanoid man with antlers and curly red hair and a lot of freckles. We got Dam, the Satyr Lord, who is one of the most powerful entities when it comes to the Seelie Fey. We got Squelch, Lord of the Leprechauns. Now, leprechauns don't actually exist in Dungeons and Dragons, not as far as I know, but still I find that this is an interesting entity to use. We got Hirsam, the Prince of Fools, who is considered to be one of the oldest archfey ever. He sometimes says that he was born from the first joke that was ever said, so that would be his story. And we got Ostara, the Dawn, who is an entity that is embodiment of flowers and nature waking up during spring, and obviously this is Traverse. This is her name is taken from Estra or Easter, so the Easter Bunny is exactly her. For the Summer Court, we got Queen Titania, we got Echtingern, the Lord of Hoofs, who is basically a unicorn crossed with Pegasus, so a winged horse with a horn on his head. We got the Lord of Centaurs. I don't know why I didn't put his name in. I believe that his full name was Skiret. Not sure about that. We got Emantiancien, the Lady of the Tree Ants, a very old tree ant, the oldest tree ants that is connected with all other tree ants. And we got Lightreach, the Emerald Knight, a knight wielding a spear that is made from material that existed before the material plane even started to exist. She is the protector of the forest, of the eternal emerald forest. In my autumn court, I got the Pumpkin King as the actual king of the autumn court. I did want to have a leader in each court, so this is why you have the Pumpkin King over here. But I also got Viridios, the Champion of Rebirth, creature that is would be considered a Seelie Fey, actually. So he's fighting with the decay that is happening during autumn, and he is some kind of let's say in the Autumn Court, he would be the devil's advocate. Let's call him that way. The Blighted One, he is the embodiment of decay. He is also the opposite of the Lady of Tree Ants. So he is a tree ant, a walking tree that is in a state of constant corruption and decay. The Lady of Ashes is the queen or lady of that what is left after the fires of the summer. And the Harvest Maiden is the queen of harvests. Well, that is roughly obvious. We got Mab, Queen of Air and Darkness in the Winter Court. I got the Prince of Frost from the 4th edition as one of the nobles. We got the North Wind. We got Berchta, the Snow Maiden, and if you don't know that entity, she is from Norse or Germanic, Germanic folklore, a terrifying entity connected somewhat with Krampus. And we got Kringle, the Father Winter. He is, again, a rather Seelie Fey, a chubby older man. We can even connect him with Santa Claus or something like that. And if you look over here in my Fey Dark, so the Underdark part of the Feywild, if we will have time, we will talk about the Fey Dark also later on. We got the Clockwork Court with the Tinker King as the leader of it. Just a small interlude here. The Iron Court, or the Clockwork Court, is a homebrew concept that is meant to be the reflection of technological progress of the material plane. Since there are firearms in my game, I took the liberty and chose that their invention is the moment of the court's birth. The Tinker King is a figure that has not yet been developed, but I see the Clockwork Court as something that consists of constructs, Fey in nature, though without the Seelie or Unseelie qualities. I'm using Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes individual design table to give the creatures enhancements and some flaws. Essentially, the court is a grim mirror of industrialization and capitalism. It only wants to grow, disregarding the costs. As such, it threatens the sensitive balance between the other courts. On my chart, I also have a place for the Courtless, Fan, the Dreadwolf, the Ruin Watcher, the Wild Hunt, the Tooth Fairy, Cernunnos, the Hunter, and the Traveler. Since I'm playing in Wildmount, the Traveler is an important Fey creature, so I needed him over here. And I got other courts, Coral, Crystal, Cloud. I didn't talk about them in depth because this is something connected with my campaign, and I'm not even sure I'm going to use them later on. The conflicts between Fey are hard to explain. On one hand side, we have the Seelie and Unseelie. The Seelie would be found in spring, summer, and autumn court usually. The Unseelie could be found in autumn, winter, and spring, again, usually, but they can traverse also different courts if you have the seasonal courts, but it would be simple to understand that the seasons fight with each other. So the summer court has different ideas about reality than the winter court. The autumn court has different ideas about reality than the spring court. This is a basic division, and it works probably the best as it doesn't involve Fey politics. The Unseelie and Seelie, on the other hand, this can be simply explained by leading different types of life. So the Seelie are connected with joy and are preoccupied with happiness, while this is something that the Unseelie cannot achieve or don't want to achieve, and they despise the Seelie because of that, and you have a simple conflict. But if we're talking about politics, well, it's something that is very, very hard to understand. Even in our human world, politics are hard to understand, and politicians are somewhat a different type of human beings, if they are human at all. The topic of Fey politics is a huge one, and I'm not entirely sure if it's one that could be elaborated in depth without knowing a particular campaign world in which you are right now. You have to understand that the Fey politics should be somewhat similar to human politics. So you have distinct political factions that want to achieve something. In a normal world, you would have the politicians act and do something while they are representatives of the Senate, the state, or whatever you have in your country. And the Fae, they don't have the exact same understanding of time. They would have the goals, they could have the same goals as us humans, but the understanding of time in Feywild for immortal beings is somewhat different. So when you don't have this clock behind you or clock in the back of your head telling you that you only have 4 years or 5 years to do something, when you can span your plots of overthrowing your rival or finding something that would be finding some dirt on your rival, and when you can span the plot for 300 years, for 1,000 years, for eternity, this is Fey politics. Since in most lore you can find that the courts are very similar to human courts and human noble courts, it is, in my opinion, safe to presume that the courts have their rules and the Feywild have their rules. So the rules can be, for example, you cannot tell a lie 3 times, or you cannot harm a representative of another court while the representative is in the demi-plane of something, or while the representative is covered in clothes. Why not? So the Fae can have very, very intrinsic and very specific codes of conduct, which they must oblige to. If they don't oblige to the codes of conduct, they risk to lose their face, for example, and that can be another rule. That can be something that you use in your games and in your world, that if a Fae doesn't act upon the rules, he diminishes, even physically diminishes, for example. Similarly as devils, when they die and they go back to being a lemur or a level 0 devil, maybe the Fae, if they break a rule, they get demoted and they stop being a powerful Fae. They are a simple sprite, for example, or a simple pixie. And this is also something which may be used by you in your games, as the humans don't necessarily need to oblige to those rules or need to follow those rules. That is also something that you can use. So you can take the Fey politics and Fey intrinsics of their court. You would need to write down some codes of conduct for yourself, but it might work pretty well. To give you an idea of how Fey politics might work, I prepared a small sketch or a small mock-up over here of how the courts might interact with each other. This is a very simplified idea. So in this idea you have the queen that is, the queen that will be, and the queen that was. And this is a concept that is also very common in different parts of literature and different lore types about the Fae, although it's not something that is common in D&D, so be aware of that if you want to use this trope in your game. The queen that is, for example, over here, this could be Titania, and this could be the queen of air and darkness, or Mab. The queen that will be is an entity or a creature, not necessarily a daughter, that will take the throne once Titania, or the queen of air and darkness, ended their lives. The queen that was, as fairies and Fey creatures are often very hard to kill or immortal, there can be situations where queens stop being queens because, for example, they lost a bet or they lost their face or something like that, or decided that it is time for them. And sometimes you can have an archfey that simply resigns from the rulership of the court. And obviously in your court you can have something like democratic elections, and maybe the queen that will be is elected when the queen that is finishes their term as the leader of the court. Different things can happen. Additionally, I added a quartz knight over here on both sides. This is a mortal creature, a mortal humanoid usually, that has been given power by one of the queens and is the queen's representative in the material plane. Now, you can already see that there's a bunch of things that can happen here. The queen that was can have some ideas about how the court should function, although she is not the queen anymore, so she can try to influence the queen that is. The queen that was could try to influence the queen that will be also, because she might think that she can just kind of backseat rule the court again. The queen that is also can plot to, for example, kill the queen that was, knowing that that she plots against her. The court's knight can be influenced by both the queen that was and the queen that is, that will be, in an attempt for them to, for example, obtain rulership of the court earlier than anticipated, let's say. Additionally, you have court representatives, and these should be powerful Fey, not necessarily archfey, but there can be powerful Fey that want to influence either the queen that is in a way, or they could try to influence the queen that will be. Now, if they try to influence the queen that will be, they obviously will be interested in making it so that the queen that will be is favorable towards them, or is disposed favorably towards them. Additionally, you can have someone try to assassinate the queen that will be, so the court representative over here could be in a minute. This court representative could be the queen that will be too, because, for example, this representative wants to replace the one that is anointed or appointed up until this point. The court's knight could additionally have some kind of own free will, or the court's knight could be, sorry for that noise, the court's knight could also be an object of assassination attempts, because if one court's knight is assassinated, there has to be a new court's knight appointed. And how awesome would it be if this court representative would have an NPC over here, NPC that would be around at the moment of the death of this court's knight. You can see the intrigue already. The amount of lines that I've drawn here is already staggering and already could be confounding, and I probably already confused you. So this is how Fey politics might work. I didn't even scratch the surface of this court, when this court could additionally be interested in this court's knight, and this court could be interested in assassinating this queen. This court could be interested in the queen that will be, or this court could be interested in having someone from this court over here as their inside help. Feywild politics can get crazy, especially if you take into account the hundreds of years that you need to plot something out. The amount of plotting, the amount of under the table plotting of mischievous or benevolent or malevolent acts is staggering over here. And that is all I got for today. I am Timur Sol, and this is basically Feywild, a series where I talk about everything Feywild from the basics to specifics. If you would like to see any specific topic, if you have anything that you would like to have researched by me, and if you would like to hear about something, you can leave me a comment in the comment section. If you liked this episode and you would like to hear more from me, you can also subscribe or give me a thumbs up. This allows me to understand what you guys like and what you don't like, and also makes the material more visible so other people can also see it. For the next episode, I think we will talk about Archfays and how to roleplay on Archfey, how to get inside the Fey head, and what's next, well, that is roughly also for you to decide.